There comes a moment in every awakening when the world you once knew no longer feels like home. The people, the places, the conversations, they all carry a faint echo of something that used to make sense, but now feels distant, almost unreal. At first, this disconnection feels like loss. It feels like exile from everything familiar. But over time, I began to see that it wasn't exile at all. It was liberation. You don't stop belonging to the world because you've fallen out of place. You stop belonging because you've begun to see that the idea of belonging was an illusion. The world we try to belong to is built on stories, stories of who we should be, what we should value, and what success should look like. But when you awaken, those stories lose their power. You begin to see that the crowd is not moving toward truth, it's moving in circles. At first, I tried to go back. I tried to fit into conversations that no longer nourished me, into expectations that no longer made sense. But I realized I could not unsee what I had seen. Once awareness expands, it doesn't shrink again. And so, the space between who I was and who I was becoming grew wider, until I could no longer pretend. Not belonging can feel lonely at first, but it's only lonely for the ego. The self that craves recognition suffers, but the awareness behind it rejoices. Because now, for the first time, I am not trying to belong to others, I am belonging to life itself. And life has no boundaries, no sides, no membership. I used to think that belonging meant safety, that being accepted meant being real. But the deeper I went, the more I realized that belonging often meant hiding parts of myself to be loved. It meant agreeing with things I didn't believe, pretending to enjoy what left me empty, following a rhythm that wasn't mine. Now I see that losing that version of belonging was not a tragedy, it was the beginning of truth. You see, to truly awaken is to stop seeking a place to fit and start realizing that the whole universe is already within you. When you no longer belong anywhere, you begin to belong everywhere. Because you stop defining yourself by the lines that separate things. You stop seeing yourself as a stranger in the world and start recognizing that you are the world, experiencing itself through human form. It's a strange kind of freedom, this feeling of not belonging. Because the ego still wants to cling. It asks, if I don't belong anywhere, then who am I? But that question is the key. Who am I when I no longer need to belong? Who am I without a label, without a group, without an identity to protect? I began to see that all belonging is conditional. Families, societies, religions, careers, all of them ask for something in return. Conformity, silence, sacrifice. They give comfort, but they also create cages. Freedom begins when you no longer pay that price. When I stopped trying to belong, I stopped betraying myself. I no longer said yes when I meant no. I no longer pretended to care about things that drained my spirit. And even though this created distance between me and others, it brought me closer to life itself. Because authenticity always costs comfort, but the reward is truth. Not belonging means standing alone, but not in isolation. It's the aloneness of a mountain, the solitude of the sea, the silence of the sky. It is vast, alive, and full. In that stillness, I found something greater than the approval of others. I found presence. The world teaches us to seek validation, to measure our worth by how well we fit in. But the awakened soul no longer fits anywhere because it no longer follows the rules of illusion. You stop playing the game of pretending to be someone for others to like. You stop needing permission to exist. And that is the beginning of real freedom. This shift is not easy. It tears away the false security that once made you feel safe. You might lose friends, you might disappoint family, you might even question your own sanity. But what is really happening is that the structures of false belonging are dissolving, and the truth of who you are is emerging. The deeper I went into solitude, the clearer I saw that I was never truly alone. The same consciousness that breathes through me breathes through everything. The trees, the waves, the stars, they never asked me to belong. They simply accepted me as part of the same movement. That realization changed everything. I no longer needed a place to stand because I realized that I was the ground itself. I no longer needed to be understood because understanding had expanded beyond words. I no longer needed belonging because I had found connection, not with people, but with existence. To not belong anymore is to live without pretending. It is to move through the world lightly, without the weight of masks and expectations. It is to see the beauty of things as they are, not as I want them to be. And in that freedom, I found a peace that belonging never gave me. Belonging ties me to conditions, but freedom ties me to life. And life is always changing. It invites me to flow, to evolve, to die and be reborn in every moment. That is the true belonging, the belonging to impermanence. The more I let go of needing to belong, the more natural everything becomes. Conversations lose their strain, choices become clear, and silence feels like a friend. Because I am no longer living through others' eyes. I am seeing directly, being directly, living directly. To not belong is not to lose something, but to return to what was never lost. The space where I can finally breathe. The space where I am not a name, not a role, not a category, just awareness. And in that space, everything belongs. When I stopped belonging, I started to feel everything more deeply. There was no crowd to blend into, no role to hide behind, no identity to shield me from life. At first, this openness felt overwhelming. Without the noise of belonging, silence became deafening. Without the rhythm of others, I had to listen for my own. And that silence, that solitude, revealed everything I had been running from. I began to realize that most people don't fear loneliness, they fear meeting themselves in it. When I finally sat in that emptiness, I saw that what I had been calling loneliness was not a lack of connection, but the absence of distraction. It was life, asking me to see it directly, to feel without filters, to exist without performance. There is a certain grief that comes when the old self dies. I felt it as if parts of me were being stripped away, the need to be liked, the need to be right, the need to prove that I mattered. The ego fights this process because its entire existence depends on belonging to something. But the soul, the awareness beneath it, knows that freedom cannot be owned. It cannot be given or taken away, it is discovered when everything else is gone. The strange thing is, once I stopped belonging, I began to love the world more deeply than ever before. Because now I could see it without conditions. I no longer loved people for what they gave me, but for what they were. I no longer sought approval from the world, but appreciation of it. And in that shift, everything became more alive. When I belonged, I lived in fear of rejection. Every action was shaped by the desire to be accepted. But the moment I stopped trying to belong, rejection lost its power. I could no longer be rejected by the world because I no longer needed its validation. And that is when true belonging began, not belonging to society, but belonging to existence. Belonging to existence means realizing that everything is temporary, yet nothing is wasted. People come and go, situations rise and fall, identities form and dissolve. But awareness remains, watching it all unfold. That awareness is who I truly am, and it does not need a place to fit in. It is the space in which everything happens. Letting go of belonging felt like drifting at first, but soon I saw that I wasn't drifting at all. I was floating, carried by something far larger than myself. The current of life knows exactly where to take me, and the only thing that ever caused pain was my attempt to swim against it. I thought I was lost, but I was only being guided. There's a kind of peace that appears when I stop trying to make people understand me. Most misunderstandings come from the mind's need to define, to label, to categorize. But truth doesn't fit into categories. The more awake I become, the less I need to explain. Silence becomes my language, and presence becomes my communication. I have learned that I don't need to be understood to be real. Reality doesn't depend on recognition. The tree does not need the forest to see it, it simply grows. The stars don't belong to the sky, they shine because they exist. In the same way, I live, I breathe, I love, without needing the world to notice. The freedom of not belonging is also the freedom to stop pretending. When I no longer seek acceptance, I can finally be honest. I can admit my confusion, my fears, my wonder, without shame. There's no image to maintain, no audience to please. Life becomes lighter, softer, and more authentic. This freedom also brings compassion. When I see that others are still trapped in the need to belong, I no longer judge them. I know how heavy that cage feels. They are not wrong, they are simply asleep in the dream of approval. And I too have lived that dream. So instead of trying to wake them, I let my peace do the teaching. Because presence speaks louder than persuasion. When you no longer belong, you start to see how much energy people spend maintaining their masks. Every argument, every competition, every attempt to impress, it's all the ego trying to belong. Trying to prove that it has a place, that it matters. But awareness doesn't need proof. It just is. The truth is, no one ever truly belongs anywhere. The world we think we belong to is constantly changing. The moment I find a place, it begins to shift. The moment I define myself, that definition becomes outdated. Everything is movement, and belonging is an illusion of permanence. To realize that is not despair, it is liberation. I stopped trying to anchor myself in a world that keeps moving. Instead, I became the movement. Now I flow with the changes, and in that flow, I find stability. Because stability doesn't mean stillness, it means trust. And I trust that life, in its infinite wisdom, will always bring me where I need to be, not where I expect, but where I grow. Sometimes, people say, I feel like I don't belong anywhere. And I tell them, that's the beginning. That's the door opening. That feeling of disconnection is not failure, it's awakening. It means the old identity no longer fits. It means the soul is expanding beyond the walls of comfort. The cocoon is breaking, and the wings are forming. Freedom begins where belonging ends. Because when I stop needing the world to hold me, I discover that I was never separate from it. The same consciousness that made the stars made me. The same energy that moves through oceans moves through my breath. How could I ever not belong when I am made of the same fabric as everything? There's a deep peace that comes from this realization. A peace that no community, no system, no approval can provide. It's the peace of knowing that I am already home. Not home as a place, but home as presence. Home as the awareness that watches all things come and go and remains untouched. So now, I walk through the world lightly. I love deeply, but I don't cling. I care, but I don't control. I connect, but I don't depend. Because belonging is no longer my goal. Freedom is. The longer I walk this path, the more I realize that not belonging is the greatest belonging of all. Because once I no longer fit anywhere, I begin to fit everywhere. There is nothing to defend, nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Life simply moves, and I move with it. Freedom is not about escaping society, or rejecting people, or isolating myself in some perfect solitude. It is about seeing that I was never bound in the first place. The world is not my cage, my attachment to it was. And once that attachment loosens, everything becomes beautiful again. I used to seek meaning through labels: teacher, thinker, friend, son, lover. Each role gave me something to hold on to. But all of them were temporary masks, and behind every mask was the same silence, the same awareness, the same being. Now, I no longer identify with the mask, I live from the silence behind it. That silence belongs nowhere, and yet it holds everything. When I stop belonging, I stop waiting for life to validate me. I stop measuring my worth by external success, by social acceptance, by the reactions of others. I no longer need to fit in, because I finally fit within myself. And when I rest in that alignment, life begins to flow effortlessly. There is a peace that cannot be found in groups or crowds, because it doesn't come from agreement. It comes from authenticity. And authenticity always leads to solitude before it leads to unity. To be true to myself means to walk alone for a while, until I realize that the path itself is made of everything. The strange paradox is that once I am comfortable not belonging, I can connect with others more genuinely than ever before. Because now there is no transaction, no hidden need. I don't need people to complete me. I share with them because I am already complete. And in that space, relationships become sacred. The freedom of not belonging is the freedom to live without defenses. I can show up fully, even if no one understands. I can speak truthfully, even if no one agrees. I can stand in silence, and feel no urge to fill it. Life becomes lighter because I am no longer dragging the weight of expectation. I have come to see that the whole idea of belonging is built on fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being unseen, fear of being insignificant. But when I look deeper, I see that the entire universe exists without needing to be seen. The flower blooms even when no one notices. The stars shine for no audience. Why should I be any different? The ego seeks belonging because it feels separate from life. Awareness doesn't need belonging because it knows it is life. When I see this clearly, the loneliness that once haunted me becomes spaciousness. And in that space, I discover love, not the love that binds, but the love that frees. I no longer belong to a tribe, a belief, or a system. I belong to the moment, to the breath, to the sound of the wind, to the rhythm of existence itself. Each moment contains all that I need. And when it passes, I don't cling, because the next moment arrives already full. There's a simple beauty in living this way. No longer chasing meaning, I start to experience it. No longer trying to find peace, I start to feel it. The peace that arises from letting everything be as it is. The peace that comes from knowing I was never apart from the whole. Not belonging anymore doesn't mean I've lost connection. It means I've lost illusion. It means I've stopped believing that connection needs approval or validation. It means I see connection in everything, in the silence, in the laughter, in the space between one breath and the next. The whole world becomes home, and yet no single place defines it. To not belong is to finally be free from the story of who I was supposed to be. It is to watch the identity dissolve, and yet feel more alive than ever. Because what remains after the story is gone is what was always real, pure awareness, unconditioned, limitless. In this space, I see that everyone is searching for the same freedom. Some call it peace, some call it God, some call it love. But it is the same truth wearing different names. It is the recognition that we are not parts of life trying to belong, but life itself, expressing through infinite forms. When I rest in this understanding, I stop asking, where do I belong? Because the question no longer makes sense. Belonging implies separation, and separation was never real. There is no edge between me and existence, no border between the observer and the observed. Everything breathes together. Freedom, then, is not a destination but a realization. It is the moment I stop searching for home and realize I never left. The moment I stop seeking approval and discover that I am already enough. The moment I stop clinging to belonging and feel the vastness of being. Now, I walk through life as a witness. I belong to no one and to everything. I am the silence behind the noise, the space between thoughts, the awareness that watches it all without judgment. And in that awareness, there is nothing missing. I don't belong anymore, and yet I have never been more at home. That is the paradox that sets the soul free. Because belonging was always about limitation, and freedom is about expansion. The more I release, the wider life becomes. The more I let go, the more everything returns. This is the essence of awakening. It is not about leaving the world, but about seeing that the world and I were never two. It is not about finding a place to stand, but realizing that I am standing everywhere. The mind may still search for a label, but awareness just smiles. And in that smile, the journey ends where it began, here, now, in the infinite belonging of not belonging.